When 30-year-old Jae-shik Park met 7-year-old Lee Yoon-hee, little did he know that she would turn his whole life around. After all, how could a little girl with a hearing and visual disability teach Jae-shik that family is more than blood? Jae-shik owns a small agency, but isn't all that fond of his artists as their agent. Forever short on cash and just about somehow managing to make ends meet, Jae-shik receives a surprising call one day. Learning that one of his artists, Ji-young, had passed away, he thought about how she had never returned the money he had lent to her. He goes to Ji-young's place hoping to find some jewelry that he could sell and get back his money. However, all he finds there is Ji-young's 7-year-old daughter, Yoon Hai. Seeing the way she walked around the house feeling her surroundings with her hands, and the fact that she did not understand that there was a visitor in the house, Jae-shik realizes her hearing and visual disabilities. While Yoon Hai continues to go about her day as any other day, Jae-shik rummages through Ji-young's belongings to find absolutely anything of value, but fails. He even gives Ji-young's ex-husband a call, hoping to get the man to take responsibility for Yoon Hai, now that she had lost her mother and had nobody else left in the world. But the man just abruptly disconnected the call, saying that he had nothing to do with Yoon Hai anymore since he had split from Ji-young. When Yoon Hai smells the smoke from Jae-shik's cigarette, she taps the floor several times in reply, to which Jae-shik also taps the floor near her. This was the first time she was acknowledging him in any way, and this seemed to be her pre-decided signal with her mother to know when she was home. Happy to have found her mother, Yoon Hai hugs Jae-shik and soon realizes that he wasn't her mother at all. She screams and moves away from him, but he pulls her back. Yoon Hai screams even louder at this apparent threat in her house. Just then, there's a loud banging noise at the front door, along with someone hitting the doorbell furiously. When Jae-shik tries to calm Yoon Hai down, she bites his hand. This causes him to shout in surprise, ensuring that the visitor at the door knows that there is someone in the house indeed. He opens the door, and a woman walks directly in and begins to comment on how dirty the place was. When he asks the lady who she is and what she had to do with Ji-young, she explains that she is the landlady. She even tells him that she was charging lower than usual rent from Ji-young because of Yoon Hai's condition. Assuming that Jae-shik was Yoon Hai's father, she scolds him about his behavior as well. She further informs him that as the lease to the apartment had just about a month left, he would either have to pay her an increased rent if they wanted to continue living there. If not, then she would sadly have to ask them to move out. Curiosity causes Jae-shik to ask about the deposit on the apartment, which he learns was enough to cover for the money Ji-young owed him. When Jae-shik tells the landlady about Ji-young's passing away, she instantly feels bad for him. After he tells her that Yoon Hai will soon be living with her grandparents in the countryside, the landlady leaves. Continuing his search through the apartment, Jae-shik finally finds the lease agreement and a plan forms in his head. After being thrown out of his place because he had not paid the rent, Jae-shik moves into Ji-young's apartment. Posing as Yoon Hai's father for the rest of the month, he planned to get his hands on the deposit of the place. What follows is his struggle to get Yoon Hai to behave accordingly. To warm her up to him, he tries giving her the food he was having instead of the bread that she prefers. After initially choosing not to eat the food he gives her, Yoon Hai's curious little mind gives into the delicious smell, and she digs into his food and eats it happily with her hands. One day, the landlady brings along a couple of other women to clean up the apartment before the realtor's visit. Looking at Yoon Hai and the state of the apartment, she tells Jae-shik that his ignorance can almost be called child abuse and neglect. She then urges him to at least give Yoon Hai a bath. He somehow manages to lure Yoon Hai out of her usual spot under the table by letting her sniff one of Ji-young's sweaters. But the landlady soon realizes that Jae-shik had never bathed Yoon Hai before. While calming Yoon Hai down through it all, the landlady proceeds to give her a bath and asks Jae-shik to learn. That night, Yoon Hai curls up against a sleeping Jae-shik's back and cries. When he realizes that she had a high fever, he takes her to the doctor. A few days later, Yoon Hai screams when Jae-shik tries washing Ji-young's sweater, which was stinking now since she had decided to carry it around everywhere to stay close to her mother. He lets go only when she bites him, and she is then relieved to have the sweater all to herself. At the counseling center later, Jae-shik was informed that since Yoon Hai was registered as visually impaired and deaf blindness wasn't a category on the National Disabilities List, Yoon Hai couldn't take up hearing impairment classes at the government's expense. Jae-shik argues that she couldn't see the teacher's signals nor hear them anyway, so neither of those classes were helpful for her. On their way back, Yoon Hai gives Jae-shik a genuine smile when he offers his finger for her to hold as they wait to cross the street. Taking matters into his own hands, Jae-shik begins teaching her the alphabet at home. Since he stands to gain from it, he begins by teaching her the word father. He patiently lets her explore each letter's block with her hands and then traces the shapes onto her palm. Urging her to look for those specific letters in the set of blocks, he even makes her trace the letters on his palm and praises her every time she gets it right. Cute as she was, Yoon Hai grabbed a snack as her reward, even after not spelling correctly. Having warmed up to her now, Jae-shik neither loses his patience nor shouts at her. All he can do is proudly smile at Yoon Hai since she was finally learning something. His happiness is short-lived though, as officials from the court soon mark everything in the apartment to be seized, including the deposit that Jae-shik had been hoping to take for himself. Trouble continues for Jae-shik with his agency in danger of being taken over by his moneylender. He is almost out of money, with even his credit card being suspended due to unpaid bills. Going through Ji-young's phone one night, Jae-shik stumbles across a few screenshots of her conversation with an aunt who had borrowed quite a lot of money from her. The very next morning, he packs up Yoon Hai's things and sets off with her in search of this aunt. While Yoon Hai enjoys her rare time out of the house in the fresh air, Jae-shik also enjoys the ride, talking to her through it. Once they reach the aunt's town, Jae-shik goes around asking people if they knew Ji-young's aunt, but is disappointed when nobody can help. When he returns to his car, he realizes that Yoon Hai has disappeared. He finds her happily playing with a puppy a little away from the car and sees that a farmer couple is looking after her. They not only get him some food, but also suggest that they can look for a space in their community center where Jae-shik could spend the night. He is then put to work on the farms with them. That night, Jae-shik is paid in boiled potatoes and eggs for all his hard work, which makes Yoon Hai smile. While she happily eats a potato, she offers some to Jae-shik as well. He gets irritated at being disturbed while talking on the phone and goes out of their room, leaving her alone. The next morning, desperately in search of some water for Yoon Hai, Jae-shik steals a watermelon from a farm. Unknown to him, his act gets caught on the farm's CCTV camera. They find a spot by a stream to enjoy the watermelon where Jae-shik teaches Yoon Hai how to spit the seeds out. Letting her feel the watermelon, he then traces the letters of the word on her palm so she could learn it as well. He even appreciates her when she successfully traced the letters back onto his palm. A young woman named Ju Yeon comes looking for them a while later and accuses Jae-shik of having stolen a watermelon from her farm. To make it up to her, he agrees to work on her farm for the day. Later that day, when it begins raining, Yoon Hai enjoys it to the fullest, while Jae-shik runs around behind her trying to get her out of the rain. Back in his car later, they have yet another lesson where Yoon Hai successfully makes the same letters out of mud as Jae-shik. While having dinner with Ju's family later that night, Jae-shik realizes that Yoon Hai kept offering him the food she ate because she wanted him to taste the things she liked, exactly like the boiled potatoes the earlier night. Putting her to sleep that night, Jae-shik comes to terms with the fact that Yoon Hai had begun considering him an important part of her life, and that she had become a big part of his life as well. Having made up his mind to stay in this town, Jae-shik inquires about the guest cottage that Ju could offer him. Her nephew brings over baby chicks for Yoon Hai to play with, and Jae-shik helps her get comfortable with them by letting her carefully touch a chick and then tracing out the letters of the word on her palm. While Jae-shik patiently handles Yoon Hai, Ju admirably watches over the two of them. She even documents and posts online about their time on the farm together, where Jae-shik and Yoon Hai spend their days happily with him, pausing every now and then to teach her. Making Yoon Hai happy, Ju also gifts her a sweater with an embroidered watermelon. Ju's posts online result in Jae-shik's moneylender finally finding out where he was, and he promptly comes over looking for him one day. After getting beaten up, Jae-shik gets a reality check that he couldn't just leave his old life behind. The moneylender takes his van and gives him a week to settle the rest of his debt. A couple of days later, Jae-shik takes Yoon Hai to a children's shelter. Clueless about her future, she happily eats her favorite bread snack offered by Jae-shik. Believing that it would be better for her to stay at the shelter instead of living with him, Jae-shik leaves. When Yoon Hai frantically moves her hands around to find that she has been left alone, she finds her way to the door and desperately bangs her hands against it while crying. Seeing her sadness, Jae-shik gets to her, and when she realizes that he came back for her, she traces the word tears on his palm just like he had tawaked her. When she hits her heed, he understands that she wanted to know who she is. Getting emotional himself, he then traces her name on her palm, which she promptly repeats for him. When she repeatedly taps him to ask who he is, Jae-shik breaks down. He traces something on her palm that she focuses on, and when she repeats the word for him, it is revealed to be father. Overwhelmed, Jae-shik then hugs her, accepting that he truly was her father. And this beautiful story also ends here.